My name is Ronnie Cruz, and this is Path of the Network Marketer.
All right, welcome back to the show. Thanks for tuning in. Today, we're going to talk about setting healthy boundaries. Setting healthy boundaries. Yesterday, I talked about how I feel like a lot of what I'm seeing in the personal development space is personal development and growth concepts and principles, which are all important and great, but they seem to be, anyways, in the context of being externally driven, meaning that they are in this context of what everybody else around you is doing and how you should respond to that. It's all well and good. Don't get me wrong. This is not a criticism of it, but I think it's also not necessarily a complete picture, because when it comes to personal development, you have to really shine the light on yourself, right? It's all about reflection of self. And that's what is reflected in the outer world. And so, when we talked about being bold yesterday, a lot of the conversations I hear out in the space is being bold in response to how you think everybody else is going to react. When really being bold is a frame of mind, right? And it's stepping beyond all your perceived limitations, right? The self imposed limitations. And so, being bold is just a matter of a shift of mindset. It really has nothing to do with anything external of you. So same thing with boundaries, right? I'm seeing this conversation around boundaries framed in a way that it's always talking about, okay, you got to make sure you guard yourself from, this type of person. You got to watch out for this type of person. And I get that, right? There definitely are relationships. There are individuals that have patterns that are less than healthy when it comes to the relationships and your interactions that you have with those individuals. So you have to protect yourself from that. However, that's, again, it's all, we have to have some level of responsibility, right? Well, not just some. We have to have complete level of responsibility about regarding why we're in that position in the first place, right? Because here's the thing that can happen when we talk about boundaries as solely something in response to the external environment, i.e. the situations and the people that you're interacting with, the groups of people that you're interacting with. There's no responsibility, right? There's no responsibility, and it can become, it develops a very guarded mindset and belief system. It develops a very adversarial me versus the rest of the world philosophy, because you're guarding yourself and you're creating these boundaries, right? It's creating walls, when really the boundary has to be internally driven, not externally driven. Again, you find yourself in situations where you're giving too much of your time, you're giving too much of your energy. It's not so much that people are asking too much of your time or too much of your energy and attention. It's that you're actually saying yes, right? And I get it, right? I get it. I definitely want to help as many people as possible, but also a lot of that can come from your own patterns of people pleasing, and not being able to say no. Again, patterns that arose and were developed as a result of some protective mechanism that happened in the past, right? In response to some form of trauma, big or small. You don't have to say yes to everybody. And in fact, you shouldn't, especially if you're listening to this podcast. That generally means you're a go-getter, and that you're working to achieve something pretty lofty, right? Something that you've never done before in your life, and so that's going to require a lot of time and energy out of yourself, right? From yourself. And so in order to make sure you're maximizing that time and energy, you will have to draw boundaries, not because anybody else is out to get you, or anybody else is other people are just trying to siphon energy and time from you. But because you just need that time and that energy to devote to what's most important. People can ask things, and I think, I did an episode on this during the holidays. People can ask things of you and from you all, as much as they want. That doesn't mean you have to say yes. You can say no without there being a judgment behind that no. And generally that judgment is of the individual and groups that you feel like you need to set boundaries with and for. And that's not really the case. The real boundary is you not being able to say no. And again, that's just a pattern that arose from you not wanting to, well, it's a protective pattern from whatever might have happened to you in the past, right? Getting yelled at for not being good enough, getting yelled at for getting something wrong, getting yelled at for not being there, et cetera, et cetera. We carry a lot of patterns from our childhood, and they may have served us at one point in our life, but again, if we're trying to achieve something, we have to address those patterns because those patterns will get in our way. People pleasing is a big one, and that's one of the reasons. That's one of the things that keeps us from setting healthy boundaries. Not being able to say no. You know what I mean? Those are the two major ones that come from. It's just a protective mechanism from not wanting to be criticized and not wanting to. The desire to appear good enough, et cetera, et cetera. So understand, boundaries doesn't mean that the world is out to get you and that you need to protect yourself from the world and the people around you. It's setting healthy limitations on where you want to spend your time and energy, and you're doing that for you, not as a response to other people, right? I think that's the most important thing. Again, we can say no without there being a justification or judgment behind you saying no, because generally speaking, those justifications and judgments end up being about the other people, and so we don't need to justify why we say no. It only has to be for us and nobody else. And honestly, it should be only for us and only because of us and not because of anybody else. If you're creating boundaries because of someone else, I mean, of course, I'm speaking generalities. There are, again, some clearly toxic people in the world, but I think those are few and far between. And there's also, the understanding that toxicity is just, those are just patterns that those individuals haven't addressed in themselves. You don't have to be responsible for any of that. And so that's a boundary. The boundary that you create is for you. You don't have to justify it to anybody, and you don't have to judge anybody to enforce that boundary. It's important to remember this because I think, just because, again, these personal development principles and philosophies that we see in the space are great. However, they can be incompletely interpreted, and therefore the entire picture isn't absorbed or isn't quite something that you can take with you in the long term, because you can't be adversarial and guarded against the rest of the world for very long. We have to function with people. It's just part of a human nature. It's part of one of our needs, and you'll find that especially as you get further along in your journey of trying to achieve your goals, you'll need to enlist the help and support of other people, right? So healthy boundaries are for you; they're for nobody else. You can create and enforce those boundaries without justification nor judgment on the people in the world around you, because they are for you and you alone, so that you can achieve the things that you can achieve. So that's my message. Hopefully that makes sense. It was a little bit long way around, but I did want to talk about boundaries, and I want to create, I want to really just, continue to reiterate that growth is inside out, not outside in. And if you're doing it, it can start as an outside in and as a response and a reaction to what's going on in external world. But what really creates lasting personal growth is working inside out. So that's the message for today. Thanks for tuning in. More from me tomorrow. So until then, be well, be safe. I'll see you in the next episode.